Hello, and welcome to the Consul product update session at HashiConf. My name's Nina Pemaraju, and I'm responsible for product management for Consul here at HashiConf. I wanted to start with a little bit of a look back about Consul itself, starting with what we presented last October at HashiConf, where my colleague Preeta and I presented Consul's product roadmap by following a fictional startup called StarNav as they grew from their MVP product to a large enterprise. We showed how Consul's features were able to solve their networking problems as they grew. And to understand more about these capabilities of Consul, as well as how they were used in the different stages of StarNav, please find the recording from last HashiConf and watch it to get more details. Next, as a recap, I also wanted to talk about the presentation by Paul Banks from HashiCorp Consul's engineering team, where he talked about some of the new capabilities of Consul, specifically targeted towards the product teams in an organization. So I want to start with that today and giving you a really fast recap of that to set the story and set the scene for some of our new capabilities, as well as a future plan. Again, it's going to be really short, so to understand more details about these, please watch the recording from HashiConf EU. But moving ahead, Paul earlier talked about this pattern of a platform team. Armand talked about it as well, organizations having a platform team. And in Consul case, the platform team needs to provide a standard networking solution to large organizations of independent teams. Often these independent teams have made their own choices about cloud providers and runtimes. But despite these different choices, the platform team needs to provide a common tooling around observability, deployment, automation, and secure cross-service connectivity. And to deliver all of these, the platform team needs a shared networking technology that they can build against and that works with everything that they are using, right? This is the pattern we hear about from almost anyone we talk to, and most organizations are trying to implement this today. And Consul aims to be the solution that works across all these different cloud providers and runtimes, providing a consistent way to secure, observe, and manage service-to-service connectivity within your organization, regardless of whether it's all controlled by one person or done by different teams, right? Then Paul went on to talk about some of the new capabilities of Consul that I want to touch about. The first capability he talked about at HashiConf EU was admin partitions. So you can think of admin partitions a bit like virtualization for Consul clusters, where there are independent teams that are doing their own clusters, and then you have to have a common way of managing them across all, right? So admin partition essentially gives you this multi-tenancy for Consul clusters, and the platform team it allows basically platform teams to operate a set of shared servers across which the application teams then can be running. And so the shared networking plane is coming from the platform team, and the application teams that are independent are running their applications on those clusters. He also talked about cluster peering. What cluster peering does, and Armand talked about it earlier, is essentially it enables cross-team connectivity between any combination of Consul clusters and admin partitions within those clusters, right? So this is a whole new model of multi-tenancy, and it was a significant change in how Consul handles cross-team cluster federation, right? Because to do this, we had to rethink how clusters work together and how you can use them to enable service connectivity without the assumption that all those clusters are managed by a single operator, right? Which is the earlier assumption in Consul that when you use multi-data center in Consul with WAN federation, there's a single operator who is managing all those clusters. So he then provided just the tiniest glimpse on what to expect from Consul. Specifically, he talked about some of the new capabilities to improve multi-cluster management with a new cluster peering model for federating Consul clusters. He talked about architectural changes to Consul to simplify operating Consul even further. And then he talked about continuing to build support for more application runtimes. So let's look at some of these futures. And specifically, let's look at multi-cluster management. But before I do that, I want to step back once more into cluster peering because that's tied to why multi-cluster management is such an essential piece. So what is cluster peering? With cluster peering, for those of you who are familiar with the WAN federation model, you don't need WAN federation anymore. Each cluster becomes independent with its own keys, its own ACLs, its own catalog, and can be operated by independent teams. So there's no more primary Consul data center because these are now independent teams. And the way you do connectivity, cross-team connectivity, is the cluster administrator explicitly establishes a peering connection with a cluster that they need to be connecting to, right? Once the peering connection is established, then the peer clusters automatically exchange relevant catalog information for the service that they want to explicitly export to the other peer. Right? So this all is really good because cluster peering, together with admin partitions, provides support for a very flexible multi-data center deployment topologies and routing of services between clusters and services owned by independent teams, right? It also provides high availability because you can have failover of when a service fails in one data center, you can fail over to the same service running in a different data center. And this failover is much more flexible because we are using envoy metrics that we are gathering to decide when to fail over, as well as when to revert back in case the service becomes healthy where it was originally running, right? You also have flexibility to choose on a per service basis where the failover destination is going to be. So this is all really exciting. It gives you flexibility in how you deploy Consul, how you as a platform team operator run your common shared Consul servers, while giving and delegating authority to the individual clusters and to how, in terms of how they run their services. However, as a platform operator, you now have a challenge that with so many independent clusters that you're running, how do you manage all of it? Each Consul cluster will provide its own UI-based control pane of glass that you can use to manage that Consul cluster. But unlike the earlier model, where in a WAN federated environment, you had the primary from where you could view all the clusters, now you don't have that since each cluster is independent, right? So as a platform operator, you're lacking that single management plane that you can use to manage all these different independent clusters that you're running. So in order to solve this problem, we looked around and said, well, what can we do, right? We've given you flexibility, but we've also created a new problem because we haven't given you a single management plane. And then we looked at our HCP console. So HCP console already has a UI that is used to manage all your Consul clusters. From this UI, you can launch new HCP managed clusters, you can view all your clusters, you can initiate federation between your clusters, and basically use that for whatever kind of operations you want to do on your HCP managed console. So we said, okay, we have a perfect solution. What we need to do is to extend it and make it the management plane for all Consul clusters. So that's what we've done. You can see in the picture here, HCP console now is the management plane for all your Consul clusters, both the ones that are in HCP and managed by us at HashiCorp, or ones that are self-managed, right? It's the common plane, and you can launch Consul clusters, you can manage them across all of that. This capability is being demoed later, and we'll talk about that in a minute. It's going into tech preview at the end of the month. We'd love for you to sign up, give us feedback to see how it's working for you and what we can do to improve it. But meanwhile, some of the capabilities that you can do with it once it's available for you to test is the ability to deploy a new self-managed Kubernetes clusters. You can access each Consul cluster's UI from HCP. You'll get global cluster summary and stats. You can get things like global service listing and the health of those services, as well as any notifications for like CVEs or upgrades that you may need to do. And again, if you want to learn more about this new management plane for Consul via HCP, please go to the talk by Sridhar Krishnamurthy. It's done later in the day today, and he's going to be showing a deep demo of the actual capabilities, starting from installing a new Consul cluster and then working your way through all the other things I talked about. Before I move off this topic, though, I wanted to give you just the tiniest glimpse of what to expect from this new management plane, right? So the new management plane today lets you bootstrap and bring up a new Kubernetes cluster. In future, what we want to do is give you the ability to link to an existing Consul cluster so that this single pane of glass is for new clusters as well as existing Consul clusters. And then once you have that, now you will have, in future, global visibility and workflows between self-managed and HCP-managed Consul clusters. So as an example, you could initiate peering between a self-managed and an HCP-managed cluster. You could get global stats across all of it. You could have a global catalog of services across all of it. So really, as a platform operator, that becomes your single management plane for all Consul-related things. So again, this capability is going to go into tech preview later in the month. We'd love for you to sign up and come give it a try and give us any feedback to see how we can improve it and how we can help you as you are running your multiple Consul clusters. Next, let's look at a new capability being added to simplify operating Consul clusters for the platform team. Armand touched about this already in the morning. But just to set context, I wanted to start off with what does the current architecture look like? So in this architecture, for those who are running this, you can see there are Consul server agents, and then there are client agents that sit closer to where the services are being installed. And these client agents also manage the Envoy proxy instance that's running there, right? The Consul client agents talk to each other and to the server agents using gossip. So the gossip protocol is basically used to manage membership of agents within the Consul. It's also used to do things like health checking. It is a broadcast mechanism, so there's a fairly good amount of gossip communication that's happening. Right? This model obviously is how people are deploying, but there are challenges associated with this model. Right? First, is you need to run a Consul client agent on a per host basis. When you have this many client agents running, it's difficult to orchestrate an upgrade because you may need to coordinate with a different team because that's where the client agents are running. Or even when you're first bootstrapping it, to securely bootstrap a large number of Consul agents in case you're deploying at scale could be a challenge. We require the gossip protocol to be running, which has constraints around reachability as well as latency. And so some of the networking environments you're running it, this may not be possible, or you may have to open up ports specifically to allow gossip to work. And then finally, especially in an orchestrated environment like Kubernetes, which has its own health checks versus Consul client agents being the source of truth, you may end up with conflicts between what Consul thinks versus what Kubernetes thinks in terms of health of services. Right? And so the new architecture that we are now releasing, and it's available in beta today and will be going GA in a few weeks, is a significant redesign where we do not have client agents anymore. We've removed the client agents. And with the client agents, as you can see from the diagram, once they are gone, you don't have to worry about all the LAN gossip pieces that exist. Those are not necessary. Instead, we have installed what is a really lightweight component called the Consul data plane. Right? That Consul data plane now sits alongside with the service instance And its main responsibility is to manage the proxy instance. And then that console data plane, lightweight instance, then communicates with the servers using gRPC. So it's a much lighter protocol. You don't have to worry about gossip anymore. This new architecture provides multiple benefits, right? First, with no client agents, the deployment of Consul is simplified. And you can also deploy Consul in many more Kubernetes distributions, specifically, for example, AWS EKS Fargate, where you couldn't deploy Consul client agents earlier. Right? Secondly, when you need to upgrade, only servers need to be upgraded. So if you want to take advantage of new service mesh capabilities, you can do it by upgrading servers without having to worry about how you upgrade clients. Next, with the LAN gossip removed, you don't have any of the challenges associated with the LAN gossip communication and the low latency requirement. So now you can install Consul in many environments where otherwise you couldn't have because of the networking requirements. And then lastly, we talked earlier about the conflict between Consul being a source of truth versus Kubernetes itself being a source of truth. With the client agents no longer there, that conflict is not there because the health information is really coming from where Kubernetes is seeing it. So a much simplified architecture providing multiple benefits. It is available today with Kubernetes. We hope you will try it and see the benefits of the architecture. But also, we are not stopping there, right? Deploying it and making it available in Kubernetes was our first phase. In future, we want to support it in other non-Kubernetes environment because one of the values of Consul is to be multi-platform and to let you run your applications where you want to run them. So as we continue down this development path, we expect to support other non-Kubernetes environments as well. And if you want to learn more about this new Consul data plane architecture, there's a talk by Irina Shustava from the Consul engineering team. So please go listen to it, watch her demo. You'll really see how this is all coming together. So global visibility and control, that common management plane we talked about, as well as the Consul data plane, are really big changes for Consul. So I've spent a lot of time talking about it, as well as directing you to talks that will give you further deep dives into it. But I also want to touch a little bit more on some of the new capabilities we are introducing with respect to runtimes. So the first one I want to talk about is Consul on Windows, right? So earlier, the Envoy project released support for Envoy on Windows Server 2019. So with that, now we are supporting Consul on Windows Server Consul Service Mesh on Windows Server 2019. That is available in beta today. Again, we'd love for you to try it out. Give us feedback on how it's working. If you have Windows workloads, even as you're migrating maybe to newer workloads, see how Consul can help you bridge between your Windows workloads and your non-Windows workloads. The second piece I wanted to talk about is Consul and serverless, and specifically AWS Lambda. Right? So earlier in the year, we had announced that Consul Service Mesh on AWS Lambda with mesh services invoking Lambda functions is available. We're now excited to announce that it is generally available. It was in beta earlier. But along with that, we are announcing the beta of Lambda to mesh, right? So Lambda functions calling mesh services, right? And this integration is really interesting because it provides encrypted and authenticated communications from mesh services to Lambda functions, and the ability to basically have the same reliability and observability when your services from the mesh are calling Lambda functions, right? And then in the reverse directions, when Lambda functions are calling into services in the mesh, you have ability to apply access control just like you would with any other mesh services. So really excited about this integration with AWS Lambda. And we have a hands-on session being run by Eddie Rowe from the Consul education team, where he'll take you through deploying Consul and then having it interact with Lambda functions. Right. And then finally, I wanted to introduce Consul on AWS Wavelength. for securing applications that are run on the mobile edge. So AWS Wavelength is an extension of the Kubernetes service that AWS offers. But this is done very much to enable applications at the mobile edge and to secure them. And this work that it was done jointly by 3 teams, those from AWS, from Verizon, and of course the HashiCorp team. Right? So this again extends Consul's multi-platform capability. And there's a talk on this topic tomorrow by Robert Belson. So I'd encourage you to go watch that and see how you can use Consul at a mobile edge to secure those mobile applications. So all of these capabilities represent a huge amount of work from different HashiCorp teams. Not to mention, the things that I didn't talk about, because there's been hundreds of small enhancements and fixes that have been shipping over the year. Right? But they all are focused on the same common theme, that Consul is the networking tool that teams can standardize on, regardless of where their applications run, whatever cloud providers you choose, whatever runtimes you choose. You can use the same standard mechanisms that Consul provides for all your applications and the networking needs for those applications. So that's it for me. Thank you very much for your time, and hope you enjoy the rest of HashiConf.